Hi everybody and welcome back to another chess tips video. This one has been requested by hundreds of people at this point. Pawn play. Pawns are like the fence of a chess position. They are the barrier between both players. The more pawns there are on the board, the position is closed and has a different nature than if pawns are traded and the position is open. Not to mention that every time a pawn moves or is traded, the position changes. And that is something that hopefully you will begin to develop over the course of this video as a skill. I have 7 examples for you. I will name the concepts throughout. You can check the timestamps to review what I said in case you miss it. Let's jump into it. Okay, first things first. This position, which was played between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Peter Svidler in the Legends of Chess. All of our examples will be from that tournament. In this one, pawns are going to be used as a spatial barrier, okay? And we are introducing the concept of pawn trades in the center of the board. Obviously, right now, already you can pick up the fact that we're in a Rue Lopez. There's 8 pawns per side, so the position is more closed. Here, a central pawn trade is beneficial to white, because if everything is traded off, then white simply has a knight in the center of the board. But let's quickly analyze what happens from this position to the position with the knight on d4. The c file is open, the e file is open, and also certain diagonals have now opened up. White used to have a pawn on this square, now this is more open, so this bishop has a bit more of a long range. This diagonal could be something, and so on and so forth. In the game, the second trade did not occur, and instead Peter Svidler returned back to knight c6. So now, should you take in the center or push? Spatial barrier. Attacking the knight, because its only way forward is to go to b4, and the bishop simply retreats. And actually, this knight is in danger of getting trapped. Pawn play. This pawn is suppressing. So here, how is black going to create a getaway square for this knight? Anticipating that this move is coming. Very good. a5. Using pawn play, opening up the square on a6. However, a3 still played, knight a6, and now a spatial barrier. Prevent this knight from coming to b4. Nice little tactical trick. He plays, to c5. He plays b4 himself. The idea being that if this trade occurs, which it did in a few moves, the knight cannot recapture due to the pin on the rook. Now, if the position was such that the bishop was on b7, then b4 would simply be impossible. However, based on the situation of the a file, this is possible. If the bishop was on b7, then white would need to create a move like b4 with the defense, with something like bishop to d2. What happens in the game is we get a position as if that occurred, and so the pawns here are spatial barriers. You are controlling space in your opponent's position, and this pawn, blocked in by this pawn, could be a target in the future, and it will be. I'm not going to go through the full game, but what I will say is that pawns are very good at restricting pieces of the opponent, and actually we do see that. It is still a close position given that 6 pawns are per side, but certain places are open, like the c file, the a file, and so on and so forth. Now, the next one that we're going to look at is this position between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Anish Giri. In this position, 1 pawn has already been traded, the c pawn for black and the d pawn for white. What else do you notice? With pawn play, you should not push so many pawns in the beginning of the game. And notice also that black is castled and white is not. And if you're playing with the black pieces here and your opponent is at least a few moves away from getting castled, you should look for breaking open the center. And that's actually exactly what Anish Giri does. He takes on f4, which you can argue helps white develop, but he simply trades this pawn off and then pushes this pawn into the center. And you say, well, Levy, what's so good about that? I just take. Right, but remember what I said about pawns affecting the position when they move? Right, so which file is closed now? The D file. Which file is open now? The E file. So rook e8. And it's sort of becoming difficult to defend this king. In the game, Nepo played e5, and after knight d7, this pawn is still hanging, but... Right? And then the game got complicated. For the most part, if your opponent is overly aggressive in the opening with their pawns, you really should look, and you're castled already, you really should look for center-shattering moves like d5. Because with the king stuck in the center, at least 2 moves away from getting castled, bad things will await the player who has not moved their king. Okay, we are going to look now at this position between Peter Lecco and Peter Svidler, matchup of Peters. Now, again, white has a big central presence. This position is more closed. Why? 7 pawns each. So when there's 7 pawns, that's 1 away from 8, which means the fences are almost fully built. White to move. This particular position is something I like to call the door, and it's like a clearance move. You essentially move a pawn and then use the square that pawn used to stand on as a transfer mode for your pieces, a transfer zone for your pieces, if you will. And with your pawn move, you secure a enemy square. Okay? So without any further delay, d5 is a fantastic move in this position. And why? So that pawn now secures the c6 square, and it opens the d4 square for the knight to transfer. This is an advanced move, d5. A lot of you probably see that if you look at this position, and if you don't, well, takes, the queen is hanging and the knight is hanging, because that's a more tactical, more confrontational move. But e5, I don't have to take you. It's not checkers. I'll just put my knight on d5, and, well, you're not going to make progress in the position. But d5 is a more positional approach, and actually watch as the game progresses how this square is used multiple times throughout the game. So knight e5, he transfers this way, and bishop d4. He uses this move to transfer his knight, to f5, and then put the bishop and have pressure on Peter Svidler's entire position. And Peter Lecco went on to win a very, very convincing game using this thing called the door, the clearance, as well as pawn move to secure space in the enemy territory. The next one is a little bit more barbaric, shall we say, and it is this one. It is a position where black has castled, white has not, but there's not a lot of action right now. It is something I like to call the caveman H-file attack, and this really does come from an opening, but in this game, Boris Gelfand played h4, h5, and normally this works when there is no knight covering. Basically, you need only the pawn to be covering, and you need the rook to be on this file. There are certain openings where this kind of crazy h-file attack actually works, and can give you a very good advantage, even if your king is in the center. It's obviously more difficult if the king is castled, because the rook won't be here. If the king is on the opposite side, once again, h4 is possible. Now, even openings where the knight is on f6, and by the way, this is kind of how you then operate. You try to get something on the h-file. In this game, Boris played a very funny queen maneuver to get the queen to h4, but there's usually other approaches, like a bishop coming to h6, which is impossible right now. But there are openings where, the Jobava London, for example, where you literally push the pawn no matter what, and then sacrifice material. You sacrifice for that knight, get your queen there, and then use this open h-file. Again, it's only good when the opponent is castled, because if they're not, what exactly are you attacking? But just in case you want to add this little tool to your pawn attack repertoire, if you will. Okay, so hopefully that one is helpful. For this next one, we're gonna look at a Vladimir Kramnik Ding Liren game, which actually happened earlier today at the time of recording. What's the first thing that you notice about this position? So notice that black is up a pawn, right? But white has a gigantic central space, and these pawns play into this bishop. So this bishop is what we call, it's like biting on rock. It can't break through that structure at all. Black also does not have a pawn break in the center, a pawn break being a spot in the position where you can trade pawns advantageously. Because if black plays e5, who said I'm going to take you? I'm simply going to go here, right? So try to pause the video here for a second. Actually, 2 moves happen in the game. These. How does black utilize where his pawns have a majority to create play in the position and target something in white's position, which potentially is the weak spot? a5. Fantastic. And now using some b4 ideas to maybe also bring the knight back. There's also the lingering threat of this queen coming to a3, and playing on the queen side where you are stronger and where you have maximum pressure on the base of a pawn chain is the way that you should operate here. This one is more of a pawn expansion, more of a pawn break, kind of a lesson in and of itself. Obviously a little bit more nuanced. Vladimir Kramnik, it took him about 15 to 20 minutes to make something happen, but you need to find where in the position you can play with your pawns, what squares you support, and what the best areas of operation are. Okay, This next one is an example from a game between Boris Gelfand and Anish Giri, and actually for about the next 10 moves, there's a lot of different pawn play. I put here space, taking space, restricting enemy pieces, and pawn breaks once again. So in the game, we got bishop d6 hitting this. You can either move this, this, or this. In the game, we got f4 because that restricts the e-pawn push. Notice that this square puts a grasp on this, this push, but on this square, there was a little bit of a weakening, right? Because the pawn went forward. Now, a6. So with a6, what does Anish want? He wants to maybe play b5. How do we restrict that? a4. More pawn play. Rook c8, rook c1. We restrict anything coming to the b6 square by playing the move a5. And notice clearance, knight a4, which you learned in the Peter Lecco example, allows the knight to get to a4, and then there is a very nice position there for the knight. Now, again, we have a few more moves played, some trades occur, and in this position, the fantastic move g5. Playing against the weakness that Gelfand put, not necessarily a weakness, but pawn break, right? An advantageous spot in the position where you can offer a trade of pawns that can improve your pieces. And actually, in the game, we got exactly that. We got this trade, and what does this trade do to the white position? Let's see how much you've been focusing. I know it's 10 minutes in. If you're still with me, what has white weakened? The d4 square. The d4 square. And that went on to be a problem. And by the way, another g5 came, right? Because Giri had double pawns, so he reinforced. There you go. Okay. For this last example, we are going to look at a very closed position. This is a game played between Vladimir Kramnik and Jan Nepomniachtchi. And, well, both sides have 8 pawns. It's as maximally chaotic as it can possibly be. Pawn breaks are going to be super essential here. How many of them does white have? 1, 2. This doesn't really count. I'm not going to count this because I don't know. No one's going to play h4. 1, 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. Right? In the game, Vlad played f4, and he tried to transform the position in this way by trading off the bishops, but as his luck would have it, after knight g6, there's another already very interesting dynamic here. Pawn play once again. If the queen takes, then the queen comes out and starts to attack. But if the pawn takes, you bring the rook using the new pawn trade on the open h-file, and how do you get your queen to the h-file? If I told you right now, black to move, get the queen to the h-file in 2 turns, you would try to move the queen, but you can't do it that way. Open the door for the queen. Pawn play. Opening the door for the pieces, right? Now, this is the way the game actually went. However, in this position, Vladimir Kramnik had a few options. Number 1, he had this pawn break b4. This pawn break looks stupid because at the end of the day, I mean, you know, let's say this rook trade comes in, you're just losing a pawn. However, this pawn break trades off the entire queen side, and actually your queen begins to mobilize. And if black desperately tries to hang on with queen b6, you are first to the queen side with all of your pieces. A bit of an advanced concept. However, here's the thing about square securing, which we talked about earlier. You'd like to play the move knight to c4, but then b5 is going to happen. So play a4. When you push a4, you now start to defend the b5 square and allow knight c4 to happen, but you severely weaken what square? The b4 square. I mean, black controls the square and you won't be playing this move. But for the cost of playing knight to c4, it's probably worth it. And later in the game, you know, we saw other dynamics, like in this position, b6, bishop a6, a break here by Kramnik, and this opening of the position actually proved to be only worse for Vlad, because later in the game, Nepo played the move rook b6 and used the open b-file, ultimately culminating 6 moves later with the stunning maneuver rook b2 and rook takes h2 check. So it's just kind of funny how this little piece transfer turned out to be so devastating because of how the position opened up. But going all the way back here, the way you play closed positions is you secure certain outposts for your pieces, you look for pawn breaks that are advantageous to you. And I say, Levy, well, can you give me a system to tell me how that's going to happen? That's just from experience. How dominant of a piece do you get? How much are you surrendering to your opponent? For example, a move like e4 definitely is not good because black goes f4, and now black has a huge kingside attack. You've closed off the center for your pieces, and black just has a good attack here brewing on your kingside. Listen, this was a 15-minute video. I really tried to do my best. Again, everything that I talked about will be in the description, and there will be timestamps. Let me know if you have any other questions in the comments below about pawn play. I will try to answer as much as possible. And 2 videos are going to appear to my left. If you enjoyed this one, give it a like and maybe share it with somebody. As far as the questions, I don't really have any. Maybe what's your favorite season and what you like to do in your favorite season most of all. And that's all for me. Hope you're enjoying the chess tips series. There's a link in the description to our amazing chess community. That is the Discord. If you like me and you'd like to support me, you want to check out my openings courses, they're there as well. All right, I'll see you in the next chess tips video.